The Eagle has landed, and it is time for another episode of A Little Off the Top with your host,
Hannah
and Noah. We have a mysterious third guest here that will be introduced in just a moment. But first, a little bit of intro section here. How are things going for you, Hannah?
Everything's going good.
Going good?
Yeah.
How are you? How's your week going?
So far, the week's been good. I was on call this past weekend, and for the most part, they left me alone, so it was all right.
Nice, nice. Yeah. So we're here. My week has not been busy. It was pretty busy with everything in the sense of doing a lot of cooking, and stuff like that, and people been
He's getting his gumbo out to Nebraska.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. People enjoying that a lot. And speaking of gumbo, I guess this is the best way to do it, right? I mean, it just a natural
Absolutely.
connection here. This fella here, excited to have him on the podcast. I have known him for quite a long time. We have a few connections that I wouldn't say that we're necessarily great friends or anything like that, but we've known each other for quite a long time, and he has quite the following on TikTok, and we're excited to chat with him today. So let's just pop him on here right now. Here's Dillon Weldon. Glad to have you on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to see you. It's been a long time since I've seen you.
Yeah,
but you've been traveling the world, I guess.
Yeah. Which you're getting quite a bit of traveling in as well with all the stuff going on.
Yeah, a lot of back and forth from Nashville, which I tell you is about the most boring drive from Sugartown, Louisiana to Nashville.
Yeah.
Lots of cotton fields.
I can tell you, I know of one other drive, not as long, but one other drive that's definitely more boring, and that is from the town of Valentine, Nebraska to Omaha, Nebraska. There is nothing in between those two towns. It is about 5 hours of just flat.
I think I would rather make the 19-hour drive from Maine to North Carolina than to continuously do the Omaha drive. It's so boring.
Her first contract of this traveling was in Maine, and when we headed home, I had the bright idea, we'll just do it all in one day. It'll be fine. And it was not fine. It was not fine. But anyway, Dillon, you like you said, you're from Sugartown and not far from where I grew up. I think our initial connection is I graduated with one of your cousins, right?
Taylor?
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
She's my first cousin.
Okay, so I graduated with her and was pretty good friends with her during high school and stuff, and then I remember your days of your comedy stuff and all that good stuff back in the day. And anyway, I guess we'll just get straight into the interview. Tell us a little bit about growing up in there, and it's you love country music, obviously. So what are the influence of where you grew up with your love of country music?
Well, you know how it is. You talk about the comedy days, which, by the way, anybody watching that has all been wiped from the internet. But you know how it is growing up out here. There's nothing to do. You got to drive to Lake Charles to do anything, which is an hour and 10 away. So you got to get creative. And I think in high school, we were just bored. And so out of boredom, stemmed the creativity, and we started doing videos and stuff. And I really liked it. So, and I've always loved country music since I was a kid. I tell the story often. I got one of these little cassette players, like a little Sony Walkman.
Yeah.
And I'd asked for it for, I think it was my third or fourth birthday, and a Best of Johnny Paycheck cassette, back when cassettes were still the big deal. But that's what I'd asked for when I was 3 or 4 years old. So I've always loved country music. So I just kind of combined those two passions and never expected. I mean, right now we just hit 750,000 followers across all platforms.
Wow.
and I never expected it to go that far, which I'm very thankful and lucky that it has.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it is funny. I see a lot of creators in this way that they kind of just start doing things. Obviously, you have your influencers and things like that, but the creators who are passionate about what they're making or what they're talking about or whatever, they say, at first they were just making these videos in the sense of like, I just want to do this because I like it, and I'm interested in it. And do you remember your first video that kind of got like kind of popped off, I guess?
Absolutely. It was actually about a year and a half ago in May of 2023. I mean, I had some before then that would get, I probably had hit 100,000 on a video by that point, but my first one to get over 1 million was in May, I think around May 19th of 2023. And it was such odd timing because I was kind of at a point. I'd been working in Montana, then I went down to Austin, and I was supposed to have this job in Houston, and it didn't work out. And I was at a point in life where I didn't know what to do next because everything that I had been trying up until that point just wasn't working.
Yeah.
And so another connection you and I have going back was church.
Yep.
Went to church together, and so I've always been a spiritual person. I remember I went out on my porch in Houston in this house that we had just rented for a job that fell through, and I said, God, yeah, your book says you feed the birds and not to worry because they don't. Uh, so I've tried it every way, my way. I'm handing it over to you. And it wasn't 2 or 3 days later that video takes off.
Wow.
And TikTok implemented this new creator program that paid a whole lot more than the previous program. And so I get off that one video, I made probably $600 or $700. And I was like, well, okay, if I did it once, I can probably do it again.
Yeah.
And it kind of lit a fire under me. And me and my friend Josh Walker made a pact around that same time that we were going to try to be consistent for a year and see how far we could get.
Yeah.
So just started posting consistently, and it was just one after the other, and I started making a living off of it, and I hadn't stopped since. It's been a pretty wild ride.
That's awesome. Yeah, God, it's funny. I know that I think everybody I've talked to has had a moment where God has just opened a door for them in a way that you didn't see at all. I mean, for me personally, I moved halfway across the country to go to seminary with. I knew where I was going to live and I knew where I was going to go to school, and that was it. That's what I knew. And so before I moved, I was trying to plan out, all right, I need to do some fundraising and stuff like that to try to make enough money so I was doing all the church fundraisers. I was doing, like churches doing love offerings, and I was selling t-shirts and all these different things. And it was I got to about halfway and I was like, man, I guess this is what I'm going to have to live on. I'm just going to have to be real cheap and stuff. And I remember I was at the church that I was an intern at currently, and this old fellow walked up to me, and I do not know him whatsoever. It was a big church that I was interning at, and he said, "Hey, I just want to give you a little something, because I know you're leaving soon, and I know you need this." And he said that I've seen you lead worship. I've seen you care for the people, and I want you to have this. I was like, all right, thank you so much. And that had happened before, and people give 50, 100, and that's amazing. Those are amazing. I open this envelope when I get in my car, and it's a check for $1,000 written with my name on it, and I just broke down, and he had just my goal was $2,000 and I was inching to 1,000, and I was like, well, this is going to have to make me until I get another job, and God doubled it right there with one person. And I'm sure that fella does not, I'm sure he does not make a ton of money or he's probably a retired old fella, but he just felt like God told him. And I think that's definitely the case. Is God opens doors for us, and it's always in ways that we do not see it at all.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, isn't it incredible too that when you're in the right place doing the right things, that those doors do start to open. It's like 10 years just about it, I was trying to do things that wasn't necessarily my calling, I don't think, and it just never would work out. And then as soon as I turn it over, it starts working out. And it sounds like you have a similar kind of story.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful in the fact that you think you're doing all the right things, and you're like, man, these are the doors that are open, and you're thinking these are the doors that are opening, but for some reason, as soon as they open, they close just as fast for some reason, and you realize that isn't the case. So, well, you kind of answered already our next question that we had planned, which was where did the love of country music start? With that, I just thought of this to kind of tie into that, Hannah, not to take your question from you, but do you remember the first cassette tape that you got for that little Walkman?
It was Johnny Paycheck's Greatest Hits, and I wore that thing out, man. I mean, I played both sides of it. I thought that was the coolest thing I'd ever received. And I remember I was probably 9 years old, maybe 10 years old when Johnny Paycheck died. And my dad coming and telling me, like breaking the news to me that Johnny Paycheck had passed. And I felt like I had a grandpa pass or something, because through music, you can connect to it. It feels like you know him because you're a musician, Noah. You put your heart and soul into your songs and what you create. So people feel like they know who you are through a shared passion, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that breaks the seal between a guy who's definitely doing it because he's trying to make it in the industry and a guy who loves what he's doing,
Yeah.
It's the heart behind the songs and what you can tell in those songs. um
Well, you can even tell the difference between artists who write their own music and artists who pick up songs that are written for them.
100%.
It's different. It feels different. The song feels different.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's like the difference between a I don't know, a Luke Bryan and a Tyler Childers. It's the heart
Well,
there.
even like you have one of my favorite songs, Sunday Morning Coming Down. Johnny Cash sang it,
Yeah.
Ray Stevens sang it, but Chris Christopherson wrote it.
Right.
And I love Johnny Cash's version, one of my favorites. But it's something about Chris Christopherson, because when he wrote that, he just really was at a low point in his life. And
Yeah.
when he sings it, you can feel it. And Johnny Cash was very good at singing other people's songs and still
Sure.
making you feel it. But
Sure.
even like Poncho and Lefty, like Townes Van Zandt wrote all those songs. Townes Van Zandt wasn't a great vocalist at all, but
Right.
I've listened to hours of him singing it just because you can feel the pain in songs like Marie, stuff like that. It's just, I love listening to songwriters sing their own music.
Yeah.
That's kind of, Bob Dylan's the same way. Bob Dylan can't sing out of a bucket, but man, can he write. He can write. Hannah, you can take the next question here. Number 3.
So we've spoke about country music a lot, and I'm sure that you listen to different genres than just country. But what does music mean to you in general? Like, what's so special about music for you?
I mean, for me, especially over the past year and a half, it's kind of become life. It's always something, no matter what you feel in just about any genre, but especially country music, no matter how you're feeling, you can almost find a song that matches the way you feel, and you can relate to it. And when you're sad, you want to listen to sad songs. When you're happy, you want to listen to happy songs. That's just how it is. It resonates. Music just does something for the soul. I think music is a godsend for all of us.
Absolutely. I think, talking about that Sunday Morning Coming Down, the Chris Christopherson song, with him recently passing away, I've seen a lot of videos of people covering that song, and lots of people posting, clips of him doing that song. And that song, it shows this, and I see this in a lot of music. There's this uh, there's this hole, inside of them, and as believers, we know that hole gets filled by one thing and one thing only. We're created with a God-sized hole in our heart.
Mhm.
That we're made to worship God. We're made to live for Him, and so, that song just shows this deep yearning for uh, something,
Yeah.
and I think that that's the beauty of music. Like you said, it's just this connection that I don't think there's anything else that gives a connection like music does.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Folks like you and I definitely we see that the God shaped hole, like you're talking about. But music for different people, you can take the same song since we're talking Sunday morning coming down, and play it for 10 different people, and they're going to relate it to their own personal feelings. And I've heard different people talk about what that song means to them. And it's different across the board. A lot of people. I think everybody at some point in their life, they might not have been in those same shoes of I woke up Sunday morning with no way to comb my hair or hold my head that didn't hurt
Yeah,
or hung over. But I think everybody's felt that feeling of just being down and maybe not knowing where to go next. So songs can have so many different interpretations to different people, and I think that's part of the beauty of it.
yeah, absolutely. When I write, um, when I write songs or when I write in general, which let me put a little pitch here. I put this in the last episode, but just for people to hear for just a second, I am coming out with a poetry book later this month. Very excited for that. It's called Scribbles and Notes, a collection of reflections. I have never really been necessarily a poet, but I took on this challenge. It was this thing that a publishing company had posted, and just really excited. I'll be finished. I'm 2/3 of the way done with it. It'll be a short little book, so I'm going to try to make sure that it's a cheap little book, but really excited for that, and just what that has done for me in the time that I've been writing it. But back to music, and poetry is very similar in this way, and I think a lot of songwriting is poetry, but it's just this. It's a way to open up your heart, and that is so different from anything else, you know,
Yeah.
because you're portraying it not only through the music and through the lyrics, but also through your voice if you're the person performing it.
Hmm.
So, well, you kind of went into this a little bit, but how did the whole blow up on TikTok happen? How long did it take? How has it been a slow crawl? Was there one night where you went from X amount of followers to Y amount of followers? What happened there? So
Well, first off, I want to congratulate you on your book coming out and
thank you.
everything, and kind of reminds me of Shel Silverstein. I don't know if you're
Uh
familiar
oh.
with Shel.
Yeah.
He, yeah, he wrote "Boy Named Sue," cover of the Rolling Stones, a bunch of Bobby Bear stuff, Marie Laveau. But he was also a poet and came out with books too. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
But anyway, to answer your question, uh, I started around COVID. I think a lot of people started on their dreams in COVID. That was the one good thing about COVID is everybody was stuck in their house and like, you know what? The heck with all this stuff I've been doing. I'm gonna try something new. That's about the
Yeah.
time though that I started, and it was a long time. Like I said, May of 2023 is when I started being able to make a living off of it. So a few years of testing the waters, really testing what would work, what didn't work, what people liked and didn't like, and trying to capitalize on those things. But yeah, once I figured out what was working, it was pretty fast from there. I went from in May of 2023, I didn't have a Facebook page or an Instagram page or a YouTube or anything. I just had TikTok, and I had somewhere between 30 and 35,000 followers that in 3 years that's what I'd gained. So in a year and a half, I've went from 30,000 to 750, which is pretty quick. I would say that's pretty exponential growth. I
Yeah.
mean, you've got guys like Justin Nunley, who's a friend of mine, who he in 1 month's time gained 3 million followers. So that's really, really fast growth in life. It's been a little more gradual for me, which is okay, I think, because I'm not just immediately thrown into the mix like he was. And but yeah, it's been a slower but steady, which is fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I talking about him. He has a fundraiser going on right now for people that have been affected in either Eastern Tennessee or Western North Carolina from the hurricane. And we said this last episode, but obviously our deepest condolences and our biggest prayers for and also our biggest adoration to all those people who are putting themselves out there to go help in these situations and stuff like that. As someone who grew up and lived through Katrina and Rita, and the effect that Rita had on our area was pretty widespread. Not as crazy as roads getting washed out and stuff like that, but I do remember how much was wrecked during Rita when I was younger, and just also throughout college with Southern Baptist Convention doing a lot of disaster relief from all these different hurricanes. But anyway, he's got a thing going on right now selling T-shirts that either are volunteer orange and have the shape of Tennessee on there and say "Come hell or high water," or Carolina blue and say "Come hell or high water." And he said 100% of those go to the relief funds there, local relief funds, not to we won't get into all that. But anyway, just yeah, he does a lot of good stuff with his platform, and that's really cool.
Yeah, lots of big creators are using their platforms right now to help those people, which I think is great. And like you said, we're no stranger to it down here. Laura, back in 2020, I mean, we were out electricity for a month, and just it was rough.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were you still around this neck of the woods in 2020.
I was not. I had already moved over for seminary. I moved back in
Okay.
actually a little bit before that, but
Yeah, it was like Rita was on steroids though. It was bad, man. It was pretty devastating. But yeah, we feel for those folks over there, and lots of creators are stepping up to help them, which is great. And
Yeah.
it's hard when something like that. We're no stranger to it down here.
yeah.
When something takes everything you have, that's tough, and they're definitely in our prayers as well.
Speaking of disaster relief, did you see the big concert that's going to be held in? It's the Bank of America Stadium, right, where the Panthers play.
I think so.
I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah,
where they're holding it. It's going to have Luke Combs, Eric Church, and a couple other
James
artists.
Taylor and Billy Strings.
Yeah,
yeah, that's great to see those people step up and help those guys out because they're gonna need they've the amount of flooding that they had is just the videos that you see in the pictures. It's mind blowing.
Yeah.
So they need all the help they can get. So that's fantastic that those artists are doing that.
yeah. Back where I'm from, which we kind of call our home base, it's not in the Asheville area, so where it was hit hardest, but Ashe County was one of the counties that was hit incredibly hard. The next town over from Jefferson, which is Lansing, North Carolina. There was a lot of video posts and stuff where the water on Main Street was up halfway up doors on
Mm,
those businesses, and that whole town, there's roads back there that are not accessible any other way besides mule
Yeah.
right now, and there's people going up and taking in supplies with mules and pack trains, and it's heartbreaking, especially we're 24 hours away, so there's nothing we can do physically to be helping, and it's wild. We were always told, you're up in the mountains of North Carolina, you're safe. There's not going to be hurricane, there's not going to be tornadoes, because you're it's so far inland, and then you're up, and it's wild. It's very devastating.
yeah, I think a lot of people were thinking like that because it was a very unusual thing to happen, and now we have another one coming right behind it that's going to looks like it's going to be really bad too, about to hit southern parts of Florida. So,
Yeah.
man, the east side of the country is really getting it right now.
Yeah, it I don't understand. I mean, man, it feels like the hurricane seasons have just been more and more active these last few years, and some of them just huge. I mean, I remember seeing videos, not to dwell on hurricanes for too long, but I remember seeing videos from Laura, and it like popping out the light bulbs of the street lights
Hmm.
in, and also Capital One Tower, the windows in Lake Charles, and causing like tornadoes of just glass
Hmm.
spiraling in the air and stuff like that. Just terrifying stuff.
I remember, so the first few days I stayed, and my neighbor down the road, me and him, for the winds were still kicking that morning. It was about 6 o'clock in the morning. We got out there
Hmm.
with chainsaws, and he was on his tractor, and we were cutting ways to neighbors' houses and stuff. I kind of felt like, being a young man, that was kind of my duty to stay behind and make sure and check on people's stuff whenever it was over with. And so we
Yeah.
go to cutting trees out of the way and getting to neighbors' houses and everything. But once all that was done and people started coming back, we started making our way down to Lake Charles to help. And I remember seeing some red iron buildings, and the red iron beams were just twisted up like a pretzel. It was the force that storm had was insane. It's horrible to see, people's houses just gone, and
Yeah.
it's tough. But one thing about it, and I'm sure the same thing is happening in North Carolina and Tennessee, when something like that does happen, the communities do come together, and
Yeah.
you feel like you come together closer as family and neighbors, because you go through that together and you help rebuild. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, thoughts and prayers to those people.
I you know, I've talked to Hannah about this a couple of times, but just that whole just the community comes together in a special way after disaster. It makes me think of whenever we were young, and 9/11 happened, just the way
Hmm.
that the communities were together after that. You see, well, and after disaster, you see either the best side of people or the worst side of
Yeah.
people, really,
Yeah.
and like I said, when I was in college, I did a lot of different disaster relief work. We would travel to places, because the Southern Baptist Convention, they do that. They mobilize very quickly to travel to all these places and help with mud outs and chainsaw work and yada 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 yada. But anyway, this question isn't on the list, but we were talking about your comedy days and making videos and stuff like that. Do you have a best memory from back then, like one of your favorite stories from when y'all were just being stupid teenagers?
Oh Lord, I I don't know. We just had so much fun together. I do think very fondly back on those days, because you know how it is when you graduate high school. Some of your best friends, closest friends, you don't see them for years.
Yep.
You'll go. Some of those guys I have went years without seeing or talking to, and it's sad. But you think back on it, and great memories. I think just the best part of those days was us just having fun together and being together. There was times that we would go out and just stay out all night, and I remember walking into to McDonald's in DeRitter one day, and somebody said, "Hey, y'all are those guys who make those stupid videos," and we thought that was the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, those were fun times though. I we had a great time and just clean fun.
Yeah, yeah, doing what people in the country do, which is stupid stuff to fill the time.
Yep.
Yeah, I can think of some I can think of some times where I did some stupid stuff with high school friends. Um, I'll go with a tame one, but one time we got the bright idea. We were just going to build a tree house. We were like, we got all the scrap wood in his grandpa's shop. we're going to build this tree house. We're going to do it. You know, why? I don't know. Because we are. We were two high school football players. You know, he was a wide receiver. Obviously, I was a lineman. But, you know, we're up there. We'd already made the base, and we're starting to set up the walls, and we're setting up the boards to then put like plywood up and nail them. And I'm working on nailing on this board into the tree. And I stop for a second. I'm like, hey, man. He's like, what? I'm like, I'm pretty sure I just heard the floor crack. And right whenever I said crack, the floor just went, it opened up, and I landed flat on my feet from we were probably 8 feet up ish. I don't know. And I landed flat on my feet. And for video viewers, I landed and then I went down to my knees and then I just fell flat on my face like something in a cartoon. And he had tried to grab onto the tree and slid down some of the tree. And he was, of course, shirtless. And so he had like scrapes on his chest. And so he's pacing around like, oh my gosh, I'm burning. This hurts. And I'm laying on the ground like, I know I just broke my legs. I know I just broke my legs. I'm going to have to be out of football. Coach is going to be mad at me. And we were both fine. But anyway,
You're lucky you didn't break something.
I was young.
As the X-ray tech who has imaged so many people who have landed flat on their feet like that, you're lucky you didn't break anything.
Oh man. But,
I think people don't really understand who's not from places like we are, because I talk to people up in Nashville and stuff, and they ask me where are you from? I say Sugartown, Louisiana, population 176. Which, by the way, if you look it up on Google, that's what it says. Population 176, and I'll say it's 175 right now because I'm up here. But yeah, there's just nothing to do, so you have to come up with stuff to do, and I think that's why a lot of creative people back in the day were people from, the blues started, people out in the Mississippi Delta and stuff,
Yeah.
working on farms and everything. And I think boredom just naturally you become more creative whenever you're from a place like that. There's nothing to do, so there's no distractions.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. If I got to drive all the way into town to go hang out at Walmart, which is something we would do,
Yeah, same.
it's like, well, I don't want to drive all the way into town. And when I was young, I couldn't, and my grandpa wasn't going to drive me to go to Walmart. Like anyway, we can move on. Hannah, go ahead.
What has been or a couple of your most exciting, your favorite meetups with people especially through TikTok?
Mm. I've met a lot of great people now. Um, I don't know who would be the most exciting, because I get excited just about every time I get to meet these people that I consider my heroes. One person in particular, though, that I love is Gary Gentry, who wrote The Ride in 1959, The Chicken in Black, the one I loved back then, a bunch of my favorite songs. He's become sort of a mentor to me, and he makes me call him Pawpaw Gary. He won't let me call him Mister, because he says we're family now. But he's one person who's not afraid to tell me that, hey, you shouldn't have done that. Nobody else tell me that, but he will. He'll say you shouldn't have done that. He's kind of become a mentor and just somebody who I love dearly. And but guys, other songwriters, Jim McBride, who wrote Chattahoochee, Roger Murrah, who wrote Where Corn Don't Grow, and I also get to meet great artists. T.G. Shepherd, super nice. Sent me a video for my birthday, and
Nice.
Sammy Kershaw, Sam
that's cool.
Williams, who's Hank Jr.'s son. He's a good friend of mine. Then you become friends with kind of random people. A really good friend of mine is Grayson Russell, who he played. Have you ever watched Talladega Nights?
Oh yeah.
He was the little red-headed kid.
Oh
I'm gonna
wow.
come at you like a spider monkey. He's
Yeah.
a good. In fact, we just got back from Nashville and we was staying at his apartment. Super good guy. So you meet all these just random people and become friends, and it's a whole different world, but it's neat.
I can imagine. So, I mean, do you have any good stories that come to mind of any of these meetups or anything like that, or maybe some good advice that anybody's given you, or anything like that?
Um, yeah, I have some good stories. Some stories I can't tell though. Uh, no, I most of the time I'm like a sponge when I go to there. Manuel Cuevas. I just spent the night. Me and my wife Earth spent the night at his house a few nights ago. He he got into town, and by in town I mean like Hollywood in the early '50s, late '40s, early '50s, and he started working for Nudie Khan, who made the nudie suits.
Yeah.
And so Manuel, he made all of the suits for Elvis Presley. Um, he has stories of running around with Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack in Las Vegas in the '50s.
Wow.
So I'm like, when I meet these people, he's 91 by the way, and he's hilarious. Uh, I'm just like a sponge. I'll just sit there. I will ask some questions, but I like just hearing their stories. And
Yeah.
it really just interests me, but two, it also gives me some content that I can tell some of these stories that maybe other people haven't heard. But yeah, I guess the best advice I've gotten or could give is when you get around people like that is to be a sponge. Just sit back and listen to what they got to say. You'll learn. Gary told me the other day when I was with him, we were talking about I get calls from people who want to work with me or help me or whatnot,
Yeah.
And Gary told me pretty profound. He said, this town has a whole lot of rhinestones and very few diamonds, so be careful what you pick up.
Mm.
That's
And
good.
just like that, I was like, that's a profound piece of advice. So yeah, it's cool meeting all those old timers who have all of the knowledge and who are there for everything. I just try to pick up as much as I can from those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. With meeting all those people, I'm sure there are others that you'd love to meet, but it hasn't necessarily happened yet. Is there anybody that comes to mind for you in that sense? Maybe you've tried to been scheduled, but it hasn't happened, or maybe there hasn't been any connection at all. But is there anybody that comes to mind that in that way?
One person that I would love to meet, it was two up until a couple weeks ago. I always wanted to meet Christofferson,
Yeah,
but Willie, and I don't think it'll ever happen
yeah,
because I do have a, a friend of mine who's friends with his harmonica player, Mickey Raphael, who's one of the greatest harmonica players of all time. They take a lot of precautions with Willie, which is great. They
yeah,
don't let a lot of people around him. And if you like, even his band members, when they're on the road, they take a COVID test, flu test, all of that before they get on the road. And they're not allowed to go out into town and stuff because they don't want them. When you're 91 years old,
Yeah.
yeah,
just a little cold could be very serious. So they take a lot of precautions. But yeah, I would love to meet Willie. Willie
yeah.
is, I mean, fantastic.
Yeah, if it would have been probably 5 years ago, you probably would have had a good chance of meeting him because he was still doing a lot of interviews and stuff.
Right, right.
But he's definitely showing his age more and more as time
Well, and
goes
then
on. But
COVID scared a lot of
yeah,
people and
sure,
made you
absolutely,
more aware of how easy.
absolutely. I mean, and I know I'm talking a lot on this episode, but anyway, it's just man, I mean, Willie to be still doing it at all, and to still sound pretty good singing wise, at this age is incredible. But
I saw Willie about 7 or 8 years ago in Lake Charles, and he sounded, I mean, it was bad. He was having to take a breath after two or three
mm,
words and couldn't hardly sing at all. And I remember leaving that concert, and I told my friend who I was with, I said, I think we just saw the last Willie concert we'll ever see. The way he couldn't keep his breath. I, I didn't think he'd be around much longer, but then he quit smoking and started vaping. And I think that helped him out a lot. And we got to see him not this past 4th of July, but at his last 4th of July picnic in Austin. Me and my wife went and saw him, and it was great. He sounded 10 times better than when I saw him 7 or 8 years ago. and was just on top of it. I mean, I walked out of there and I was like, heck, Willie might go on until he's 120. So I I was glad to get to see him that second time. And at that, I tell you, that was one of the coolest concerts. I've been to some really cool ones, but going to Willie's 4th of July picnic and Tyler Childers was there, Sierra Farrell, Asleep at the
Nice.
Wheel, Dwight Yoakam. It was incredible. That's one of my favorite concerts I think I've been to.
That
Nice.
sounds awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know I just asked you for some stories, but do you have a story that you can tell from this unique position? Do you have maybe a best story from not necessarily meeting somebody or anything like that, but maybe just one of the most interesting stories from your experiences? Maybe a story from somebody you met that they told you or anything like that.
I think the coolest story that I have, and I'm give me a second. I'm going to grab a prop for this one.
All right.
So this is me and Gary actually right here,
Oh.
and this is the ride. He gave me handwritten lyrics for the
Wow.
ride, and he told me a story. I've told it on my socials, but I got chills when he told me the story because I'd never heard it before. He said when he was a kid, he had a bicycle with a speaker on the handlebars. This would have been in the 50s. And he was riding, and that's the first time he ever heard Hank Williams sing. And he couldn't get home fast enough, and he told his mom, we got to go to Nashville or wherever. I want to hear Hank Williams. I got to go to one of his concerts. And she said, well, son, that's not possible. He passed away a couple of years ago. So a few years passed by, I guess, and Gary was 14 or 15 years old, and they planned to go to Nashville with one thing on their mind. They wanted to go to Hank's old house because Gary he had by this time was the biggest Hank Williams fan on the planet and wanted to see where Hank lived. So him and his mom and grandma jumped in the vehicle and they go, and they was downtown Nashville, and Gary saw two gentlemen speaking and went up to one of them and said, excuse me, sir, we're trying to find Hank Williams' house. Can you point us in the right direction? He said, no, but he probably can. And it was Ernest Tubbs standing next to him. And the guy who he'd asked was Eddie Albert from Green Acres.
Huh?
So Ernest Tubbs gives them directions to the house, and they go over there and they pull up and they're looking at it. Probably took some pictures if they had a camera. And Gary starts to get out of the car, and Gary's mom's like, what are you doing? He's like, I got to knock on the door and see if we can see the inside. She's like, you're going to get us arrested. But he did. He's like, I got to try. So he goes and knocks on the door, and a maid answers the door. And he said, I'm just the biggest Hank Senior fan there is. And I just really was wondering if we could see the inside of the house. The maid said, sure. Asked who was with him. He told his mom and grandma. Tell them to get out and come on in. So they got to go into Hank Senior's house, and the maid was showing him around, and he said that his mom and grandma was loving the kitchen because it was all state of the art, brand new stuff for the time. So they were checking everything out, and he kind of snuck off down the hall. Well, a woman steps out of the bathroom in a bathrobe with a towel on her head and says, son, can I help you? And it was Audrey Williams, Hank's wife. And he told her, I'm a big fan, and your maid let us in, and I just really wanted to see where Mister Williams is what he was calling, where Mister Williams lived. So she gives him the grand tour, shows him Hank Jr.'s bedroom, takes him to the garage, and shows him the car that Hank passed away in,
Wow.
and everything. And so as they go to leave, they're walking out, and he turns and says, Miss Audrey, I just want to say thank you for showing me all of Mr. Williams' stuff. And she said, well, you don't have to call him Mr. Son. The whole world called him Hank. And that line stuck with him. And that's in the ride. He says, you don't have to call him Mr. Mister. The whole world called him Hank. And that's where the line came from, was Miss Audrey.
Wow.
So when he told me that story, I got you. I was like, that's insane that's how that line came to be.
Yeah.
So that's probably one of my favorite stories so far that I've gotten to discover.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's really interesting, and I do really like that about your page is the sharing of the stories and stuff like that. I think it's really interesting to hear those stories that not everybody talks about, and part of it is because you're, like you said, you soak it up from people and stuff like that. And I think a lot of times people, when they're talking with people, when they're interacting with someone, when they meet someone, they're just thinking about what they're going to say afterwards. They're not hearing what the other person says, and I think we miss out on that a lot.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I also think it's very important. One of the reasons that I've started with telling the stories is not just country music, but any kind of heritage for anything you love. You should know the history.
Yeah.
You should know the history behind it, good and bad. I tell stories sometimes that aren't great stories about
Yeah.
some of my own heroes, and
Right.
but I think it's important because there's lessons to be learned in all of those stories, and it gives you just a broader perspective, and even you feel more close to what you love whenever you know the history of those things.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Uh, if you could tell the world one thing, whether that's a piece of advice or whatever, one thing, what would it be? These are the last words you say to the world. What would your words be?
Um, if it was my last words to the world, I would say trust in God, and He'll provide for you. I think that's the biggest lesson I've gotten from all of this. And do what you love. I know it can be scary, and my dad, my dad loves what I do now, but he was very skeptical, and not in a bad way. My dad loves his kids, and he wanted us to have everybody to have a safe career where we were provided for. And so when it started, and I started making a little money off of it, he told me, he said, there's this, I saw this job in the paper. Maybe you should go apply for it, because I think it would be something that could be a good career. And I said, no, I think I'm going to keep on just doing this and see where it takes me. And he didn't understand, and I didn't understand. I don't think anybody understood how far it would go.
Sure.
I really didn't know if it would be a flash in the pan thing or not, but I wanted to pursue it and see. So I would say, even if you're scared, just go ahead and do what you love, and take the chance, because one day we're all going to be in that position of being on a deathbed. And I think about that a lot. I think about myself as an old man on a deathbed. Would I regret not doing this, or would I regret doing this? I
Sure.
always try to keep that in the back of my mind, uh, because you only get this life one time. So do what you love, put your trust in God, and see where it'll take you.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's like that song, well, by the title Life's a Dance. It says life's a dance, you learn as you go, sometimes you lead and sometimes you follow. And so
Exactly. Exactly.
um and with this on the other side of things, do you have any, maybe just one or two weird interactions with a fan or follower? Have you had any
Oh,
of those?
yeah.
Yeah.
I've had a couple, and I tell you, Noah, that is the weirdest part of all of this, is going out into town, and I can go anywhere. I was in we took a European vacation this summer, me and my wife and my brother and sister, and we were in Ireland looking at this ruins of a castle, and somebody goes, Dillon Weldon, and that blew my mind. It happened in France too, and to be recognized in DeRidder is wild for me.
Sure,
So
yeah.
to go to Nashville or Ireland or somewhere else and get recognized is wild. But uh, I was actually heading to Gary's house one morning, and I was in Madison, and I'm walking into this uh, store as a guy's walking out, and he goes, "Oh man, you're Dillon Weldon. I love watching your videos." And I said, "Thank you," shook his hand and everything. Well, he follows me back into the store, and I'm like getting my stuff, and I look over, and he's looking at me, and then he hurries up and looks down. I didn't really think much of it, but I kind of had to go to the bathroom, so I put my Coke down, and I went to go to the bathroom, and he followed me into the bathroom.
Oh man.
and was just standing there, and I was like, I'm a guy, especially with stuff like this, I carry.
Yeah, sure.
And I was like, I hope I don't have to use what's sitting in my pocket right now because it was getting really weird. But I just kind of did my business and got out of there as quick as I could. But I think most people, they want to talk to you, and they love country music as much as I do. And they want to talk about it. And sometimes maybe they just don't know how to do that.
Yeah,
But that was definitely the weirdest. That was
sure.
strange. I've had some guys come up, like me and my mom was eating in town one day, and a fella come up to the table and introduced himself, and we talked for a minute, and then he just kind of lingered. But I appreciate everybody that, I love talking to people,
Sure.
and one thing about what's so cool is 750,000 people who have the same passion as me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I love about it. And I can go out and that's just one interaction. I've interacted with so many great people and talked about country music with them and made friends. I mean, some people who've come up to me are I now consider them friends. I talk to them all the time, and I've went to their houses for meals and went out with them. So it's cool to connect with people who have the same interest as you. That's one great thing about, for as much bad as can be said about social media, the good thing is you can connect with people who share those same passions.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, we are wrapping things up here. We usually try to get between 50 minutes to an hour with each episode. Sometimes we go a little longer, but we do this one last thing with people whenever we I guess we call ourselves a comedy podcast in some ways, and so these episodes are usually a little more serious when we interview someone, but we like to end it on a funny note. So we ask everybody we interview to give us your best hot dog man in the stadium impression. So your fellow with the thing on around his neck and the big container of hot dogs. Give us your best hot dog call in the stadium impression.
Oh, good Lord.
Here's your chance to touch that comedian side again.
That's right.
Oh, I don't know. I guess I have a really loud voice anyway, so it'd be pretty easy for me. I guess I'd just go around yelling, hot dogs. It's your hot dogs. I don't know. That is a unique question, Noah. I probably will never be asked that one again.
Well, Dillon, thank you so much for being on today and joining us for this episode. It's been a real treat. And like you said, it's been years since we've seen each other, so it's good to see each other at least through a camera.
Yeah.
And how can, if you have any stuff that you want to plug or how people can find you, any of that stuff, go ahead.
Well, I do also have a podcast where I interview country music people who I consider to be a big part of country music history, lots of songwriters and stuff like that. It's called Drifting Cowboy over on Spotify. We're about to have one with Elizabeth Cook that we just recorded Tuesday, I believe it was. So check that out for sure. DillonWeldon. Anywhere else you can Google it or type it in TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, any of those platforms. Find me over there.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for being on this episode with us. And, we're going to call that another episode of A Little Off the Top with your hosts,
Hannah
and Noah. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Dillon, again, thank you so much for being with us. And, this has been a really fun episode. But if you enjoyed the episode, if you enjoyed the podcast, give us 5 stars where you can give us 5 stars. All that good stuff. If they didn't like it, what do they do, Hannah?
They ignore it and just keep on scrolling.
That's right. You've listened to this episode. Give us 5 stars anyway, and then go listen to Dillon's podcast, and you'll probably like it as well. So anyway, that's going to do it for another episode of A Little Off the Top. Bye-bye.